Okay, Bismillah and Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, brother.
Okay, we're going to carry on, inshallah. So this is part 5 now, or session 5, inshallah. Thus far, we have looked at a couple of things. So let's just summarize everything before we move on, inshallah. Briefly, who can sort of remember the key sort of things we've covered from session 1 until now?
Is it session 1 we covered worldviews?
Worldviews, yeah.
And
So what
everybody has a worldview.
Yeah.
And
just do it like this. Summarize what a worldview is for me.
It's the best way to perhaps explain it is the lenses through which we see the world.
Yes.
So different people have different worldviews.
Yeah.
And two people can see the same concept in a different way.
Yes.
So one particular thing could be seen as a good thing for certain people, whereas that thing would be seen as a bad thing in another culture.
Yeah, or interpreted in different ways.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Based on someone's worldview, they'll see the same set of data and may interpret it in different ways. Worldview is also essential. Everyone has a worldview. You can't function without a worldview. You need one, right? Anything else about worldviews? Can worldviews change?
They can do.
They could
yes.
change, yeah.
Yes.
One thing I want to think about is, which we didn't mention previously, but I think it's good to mention here because we're going to get into it in the next following sessions, the last section of the course, which is on developing an Islamic worldview, right? Is how do you think worldviews are strengthened? Meaning, so say if someone has a worldview, how is that worldview strengthened for them?
Yeah, evidences that prove that give them assurance that is the correct worldview.
Okay, so it is about assurance definitely. It could be evidences, but most people don't go looking for evidences for their worldview, normally.
Someone else shares the same, like if there's a lot of people that have the same views, you may think, okay, that's
Good, yeah.
because people have the same views, that must be the correct one.
Yeah, so like a consensus, this social pressure in a way, where other people have the same worldview and you're born in that environment or you are surrounded in that environment, you think, yeah, sure, this is the correct worldview. What else strengthens it? There's one more thing.
Would it be if you codified it somehow? Like you had like a written down version of what's right and wrong. Like for example, for a Muslim that would be Quran and Sunnah. But if a society had like a working codification of proper ethics,
that may help keep people connected, but it may not help strengthen that worldview for them, right? So, yeah. Sorry, go on.
Personal experiences.
Experiences.
Okay.
So this is what I was getting at.
Okay.
It's your engagement within the worldview itself, which solidifies it for people, right? And we're going to look at this next week properly, but I want you to think about that for a little while, right? So imagine, someone that's born into a secular atheistic worldview and then grows up in that environment, right? Or if someone is born into a worldview which promotes a YOLO mentality, right? You only live once, or a materialistic worldview. You only live once, you're here, make the most of this material world. Enjoy yourself through this world, the sort of hedonistic type of lifestyle. Now, how would their worldview be strengthened? It's through the engagement with that world, right? So, take our society, for example, right? You have liberalism, this liberal secular outlook on reality. You only live once. All of these are part of our current worldview, the overarching umbrella, if you like. You only live once. Have fun, enjoy yourself, do what you like, as long as you don't harm others, make something of yourself financially, climb the economic ladder. And then we're surrounded by things which help instill that deeper within us, right? So the systems are set in that way, right? You go to school, you get an education, then you go into work, entertainment, right? Things to fulfill your desires, right? All of these things are out there. So when you engage in those things in the world, what happens? Let's go through an example. So for example, say there's a person who enjoys money, right? or isn't told that your objective is to make good money so you can have a good life, right? Now they go out and they make money, they get promotion. How do they feel? They feel good, right? That enforces that in their minds. And then they want to get even better and get even more promotions and so on and so forth. Or take desires, a very simple example. You know, we're surrounded by things, you know, we're encouraged, even if it's indirectly, that, you know, Monday to Friday you work, Friday night, Saturday night, you know, you go out, you party, you have fun, you enjoy yourself. Drink, do what you like, basically. Clubbing, etc. Right? Now, when people do this, they enjoy it. Even if it's temporary, the enjoyment, they enjoy it. And once someone enjoys that experience, what happens? It enforces it for them. Right? This felt good. This tasted good, so I want more of this. Right? So they chase that, yes, bro.
Sorry, I've heard a lot about the thrill of the chase. There's whether it's business, you know, businessmen, when they're trying to acquire something, or when they're in a struggle, they enjoy the chase more than the actual acquisition. And even, you know, a crude example is like, you can, in the hedonistic way, they enjoy chasing after a particular girl. Once they've got that girl, they can, you know, the thrill wears off, and then they're going back to the chase again.
Yes. Yeah.
So, you know, I think that's maybe something like what you're describing.
Yeah, I mean, in a specific worldview, that may be encouraged, right? That's what you should be doing, at least until you're 40. You know, that's the way you should be doing it. And if you look at it from our perspective, that's not encouraged. So one doesn't engage in that, right? And therefore doesn't get tied up with that. Because we were talking about this earlier. You know, when you do things like this, when you're chasing your desires, there are some physiological changes that take place within the body, right? The release of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin you mentioned earlier, right? And these then, it affects your neurons in your brain, right? And how they're wired. Because you have that experience, you get these release of these hormones, which make you feel good, and then that enforces that pattern in your mind. So then you go looking for it again and again because it felt good, right? But in Islam, there's certain things that are discouraged, and you stay away from them from the start. And therefore you don't fall into that trap initially, where you have to then struggle to escape from it, you know, and overcome it, right? So it's not like there's no breaking of the addiction anymore, because you don't fall into it in the first place. So you see that's how worldviews, if you like, are enforced, or ideologies or paradigms are enforced. It's through getting people to act or engage in them, right? And then over time, that builds those, physiologically at least, those patterns, those neural pathways in your mind. Psychologically, externally, from a practical sense, it becomes your lifestyle, you know. And then you fall into that, what they call the psychology of previous investment. You're so invested in that type of lifestyle and engaging in those things so much over such a long period of time of your life, that you just can't give it up. It's just that investment in all of that not the truth of it, but the investment that prevents you from giving it up, right? In our context today, if you think about why many people struggle to believe in God or to worship God, more so worship God than believe in God, because that's a separate problem in and of itself for people, is because society encourages people and teaches them, again, directly or indirectly, that they are the creators of their own destiny. They are their own gods. They create their own life, their own experience. They make things happen in their life. Now, when you ask such a person that has psychology of previous investment in that idea for 10, 20, 30, 40 years of their life, then to get them to now submit to another being, a higher being, you can see the problem there for them, right? It's very difficult. So what strengthens worldviews for people is the engagement and the experience of that worldview. Now, because this is important for us, because when we go into the next session next week, where we look at, okay, how do we now start to manifest and build an Islamic worldview for ourselves? One of the things we're going to have to do is you're going to have to break free from whatever our current worldview is. And for every individual, it'll be slightly different. It'll be an amalgamation of different things. Even the brothers in this class, we will see if we honestly reflect upon what is my current paradigm and my worldview, it may be of a shock to some of us that it's not really fully in line with the Islamic way of looking at reality. And it may be somewhat in that like that, but in some ways it may actually be quite liberal or quite secular, right? Or quite materialistic. So it's going to be an interesting exercise. So it's almost like the visual I can give you is, imagine there's a person, right? Imagine it's yourself, and you are in a body of water, right? Now you have a rope that's tied to one of your legs and it's anchored to a heavy object and it's pulling you down, and there's another rope you're holding onto which is pulling you up, right? And for most Muslims, especially in the context of the society and the world that we live in today, we're in this situation where you have the ideologies of today, the dominant ideologies of today, the godless ideologies, pulling you down towards them through showing you all the glitz and glamour of the world, encouraging you towards fulfilling your desires, chasing these things, right? And on the other side, you have Islam that you're holding on to, which is pulling you up. Now, where you are in relation to the body of water, are you drowning, right? Are you being pulled down and you're still holding on? Are you just chugging on water right now? Are you like waist high? It's going to be different for everyone. And you may be in different levels at different times through your life, right? So it's going to be a case of, okay, how do we escape this? How do you get out of this? One of the things you're going to have to do, and it's quite intuitive, is you're going to have to cut the rope that's anchoring you down, right? And the other thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to pull yourself up on the rope above so you can get out of the water, right? You can prevent yourself from drowning. So it's one, becoming aware of this, and two, then going to town in, figuring out and working on yourself. So we're going to get into that next week, inshallah. And that's why it's going to be very interesting when we get there. But for now, let's just complete this, because where we left off last session was we looked at the crises of modernity, right? And we outlined 4 main crises. Who remembers? Do you guys remember them? I'll start you guys off. The crisis of identity, right? Or you can say it's a type of anthropological crisis in a way, right? The identity of a human being. What is the human being, according to the secular, liberal, modern West, generally speaking? Now, individuals will have their own ideas, right? But I'm saying as an overarching view that emerges from this worldview, what is it?
Is it just on a very, very foundational level, just a random collection of atoms and etc.?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a reductionist, naturalist type that just wants to break it down to such a level, then yes, you're just a random arrangement of atoms and molecules. But more on a sort of, if you like, human level, like practically what are we? They would say we are animals, intelligent animals. Yeah, that's what we are. You're just intelligent animals, bipedal intelligent animals, walking on twos, right? That was the crisis of identity. And then we also looked at how, because there's no solid ethical or moral framework, which ties in with the crisis of ethics or morality, that now when you start with that base, you can literally become anything you want, or be anything you want, or define yourself as anything you want, right? Even inanimate objects these days, as people define themselves against. So the crisis of morality was the second one, or in not particular order, but it was the second one, right? Which is that there is a moral decay within society, because there is no more grounding anymore, right? We said that initially, if you go back hundreds of years, even in the West, you had Christianity. At least there was a concept of God, and people pegged their morality through God and through religion. But then when they moved into the modern age, then God was pushed aside, right? It was all about man and his own journey. And, it was man's ideas and man's conceptions of what right and wrong is, essentially. Although the modernists did hold on to Christian values and Christian ethics and morals. But then when you move further from there to postmodernism, they were like, no, they completely rejected the whole thing in some ways. They were like, okay, they just, truth is whatever you want it to be. And the meaning and morality is whatever you want it to be, right? And now in the meta-modern age phase of it, which is a combination of modernism and postmodernism, and again, the trend is still following through, right? Ethics and morals are just subjective.
So truth became consensus, basically.
Essentially, yeah. Or individual. More so individual in some ways as well, especially for the postmodernists, right? It's all the group, the social group. Yes, but it's subjective either way. So the crisis of morality, and we can see it within our societies today, right? Then you have the third one, which is the crisis of meaning, right? And again, turning away from God. There is no God, there is no creator. You cannot now find ultimate meaning in your life. You can make up meaning for yourself. You can take meaning which has been passed down generation to generation. But what is the ultimate meaning of life? There isn't any. Because without God, in the absence of God and revelation from God, there's no way of knowing why we're here, because we didn't create us. It can lead to nihilism. It can. Because some people would come up with some sort of idea for their life, what the meaning of their life is, and live by it, and they'll get by. So they won't fall into nihilism, because they'll give themselves meaning. But some would say, well, no, there is no ultimate meaning to life. There's no point in me making anything up. So what are you left with? No meaning, basically. Nihilism. So that would happen with some people as well. So it really depends. Either you'll go down the existential route or you'll go down the route of nihilism. Existential route is where you would create your own meaning, essentially, like the existentialists were doing. Right? They were coming up with new ideas and conceptions of meaning for your life, for people's life. The nihilist is more like, no, I'm not going to play this game. There is no ultimate meaning of life. There is no meaning behind anything. And that's that, basically.
But didn't Nietzsche, even though he's famous as a nihilist philosopher, didn't he say that a man must create his own meaning
Yes.
in life?
He was an existentialist.
Okay.
Yeah. He was an existentialist, although he wrote about nihilism extensively.
Okay.
But you have to remember there's different types of nihilism as well.
Okay.
So you've got existential nihilism, there's cosmic nihilism, there's about 4 or 5 different categories. So when he was speaking about nihilism, he may have been referring to it from a slightly different perspective. Whereas generally he was counted amongst the existentialist philosophers, right? He came up with the idea of the Übermensch, this powerful man creates his own morals and ethics and rules, and he breaks free from the norms of society and all of this type of stuff. Right? So you'll go down one of 2 roads, existentialism or nihilism, basically. But there is no ultimate meaning to life in the absence of God. And the 4th one, you can remember. So we got meaning, identity, morality.
Purpose. What's the purpose, but one things?
No, purpose and meaning go together. There's one more. Crisis of knowledge.
Christ.
So it's the crisis of knowledge, where we did a whole session on this, where we highlighted that from the perspective of the modern world, the dominant forms of knowledge are what? Empiricism and rationalism, right?
Epistemology.
Yeah, it's the epistemology. So it's the crisis of epistemology, if you like, right? So you got in the crisis of knowledge, the crisis of epistemology. In the crisis of morality, it's an ethical crisis. Crisis of identity is, you can say, an anthropological crisis in some ways. And the crisis of meaning is an existential crisis, right? So you have all of these crises. And we also highlighted that these things are significant. They're not small things, because these things are the foundational things human beings need to function. Meaning, morality, identity, knowledge, right? These are foundations. This is how we function, Without this, you don't have civilization, or civilizations deteriorate without these things, right? And these are the crises of the modern West. Now, Islam answers all of these crises, right? Or addresses every single one of these points, because it's from Allah. And Allah created us, and therefore He knows what our most basic and fundamental needs are, right? So every single one of these is answered in the Quran, in Islam, very clearly, okay? But before we go there, I think it's important to highlight the problem, right? There is an issue. Now, if we look at Muslims today, and I want to get your thoughts on this, right? If you ask a Muslim, what do they believe? What do you think they would say?
They would go to Quran and Sunnah.
Yeah, they would say Quran and Sunnah, believe in Allah, believe in the Prophet.
Yes, and the previous prophets.
Yeah.
And the afterlife.
Yeah, yeah.
So those would be the bare minimum.
Okay, and as far as, and I've asked this question to many people, and by the way, I'm talking about this stuff. Let me put this little note out there, yeah? For example, a smoker knows, many smokers know smoking is bad, but they still smoke, right? So I'm not talking about this stuff because I'm perfect in any way. These are things I'm working on myself as well, right? Especially the last section we're going into now, right? Because I don't want it to come across like I've figured it out and it's all fine. No. But it's important we can still talk about this stuff because it's very important, right? Many Muslims today, young Muslims especially, we recognize some of the basic beliefs, right? Allah exists, I worship Allah, I was created to worship Allah. Some would not even know that. They will know about the halal and haram. This is forbidden, not eating pork, fasting in Ramadan, going Jummah, right? Praying 5 times a day. Some won't even understand these things, right? If you were to ask them point blank. But what's more problematic is their relationship with the Quran itself, right? And something for us to ask ourselves, think about, how many times have we read the Quran, right? Not in Salah, But outside of the salah, how many times have we picked the Quran up and read it in the past week? Right? Something for us to really reflect upon and think about.
Because I'm involved in the Lighthouse mentoring, and one of the first things that we ask our clients is, do you actually pray? Do you read Quran? When was the last time? And you'd be surprised as to how many people would say, "Oh, I haven't picked up the Quran for such and such long time."
Yeah.
And the advice that we usually give is just, even if you read one verse and ponder upon it, truly ponder upon it for the rest of the day, or after every Fard Salah, just a page, it takes a minute or 2 minutes, and it really enriches enriches your soul. So it's something that, but it's surprising amount of Muslims don't actually engage with the Quran.
Yes. And that is one of the main reasons why we have much of the crises we have amongst the Muslims today. I'm sitting here and we're saying, look, Islam has the answers. It addresses all the most difficult questions that the secular world cannot deal with. It has the answers to these things. But we would all know this, bro, if we were engaging the Quran more, right? And the stuff we're going to cover is very basic, right? If we ponder and reflect upon the Quran, we would know this stuff already. And the problem is we don't engage it, right? We have the Quran, it sits on our shelves and we don't read it. Now, what does that say about the value the Quran holds for us? It's a very important question to ask. We can say, I value the Quran, it's the speech of Allah, it's the final revelation, it's preserved, all of this stuff. But talk is cheap, bro, let's be honest, right? If it's sitting on our shelves gathering dust and we haven't picked it up in the past 3 months, there is a big problem in our value of the Quran, right? What is the value the Quran holds for us? And if it's sitting on our shelves gathering dust, that says something about what the Quran truly means to you, right? And again, this is a secularized way of looking at Islam in one respect, because what we're seeing the Quran as is just revelation, right? That was given to the Prophet over 1400 years ago. Well, if it's sitting there gathering dust, what we're seeing it as is that it's not relevant for us today. Right? That's what we believe, even though if we don't say it, that's what's probably going on inside our minds, because why would it be sitting there gathering dust otherwise? If we truly believed Islam, the Quran has the answers to all of our problems, that it has the solutions, it is the way forward, it's the guide, then why would it be sitting on the shelves gathering dust?
I got hold of my grandfather's Quran,
MashaAllah.
and it was very recent, and it's basically falling to pieces because of the amount of, and that's something that I'm very proud of, because you showed that he was reading it so much that it's got multiple places where it's actually gone to pieces. He stitched it together again.
Yeah.
And whereas most Qurans, if you look at them, if they're in homes, they're in pristine condition because they haven't been opened.
Yeah. This is, bro, it reminded me, there was a scholar from Pakistan, Amin Ehsan Islahi, and on one occasion, one of his friends, I think, came over to see him, and he saw his copy of the Quran. It was sitting on the table, and he went through it, and he saw that the pages were all torn. There was lines, undermarkings, colors, where you fold the pages, notes, and he was like, what are you doing to the Quran? How are you treating the Quran? And his response to him was, well, isn't this the book that's supposed to be guidance, right? I mean, what other book am I supposed to engage? And that was his way of engaging. It showed he was engaging with the text, the Quran itself. He's reading it, undermarking it, underlining it, making references, notes, everything in it. That's a very powerful thing to think about. I mean, how many of us have Qurans that are referenced and underlined and bookmarked and all of this stuff, right? So this is something, us guys and people that may watch this need to really reflect on is, what is the value the Quran holds for us, right? Because the reality is, and there's a very interesting verse of the Quran in chapter 25, verse 30, where the Prophet ﷺ, Allah says, the messenger has cried, "O my Lord, my people have indeed received the Quran with neglect." Right? This is in the Quran itself. Obviously, there was a certain context to this historically, but we should also apply it to ourselves, because it's timeless, the ayat of the Quran. Are we receiving the Quran with neglect today? Yeah, this is a big question we need to ask ourselves. You know, we want to change the world. You know, we want to create a revolution. We want to do all this amazing work, but we don't have a relationship with the Quran. That is a problem, right? And it's something we need to, you know, reinvest in and go back to, inshallah. So let's talk about value for a second, right? It's human nature that when we truly value something, we would do anything to attain that thing or to make the most of that thing, right? If I was to tell you, brothers, right now that under this floor, imagine we're not on the 3rd floor right now, imagine this is ground floor, and under this floor right now, 6 foot under the concrete, there is a treasure trove with diamonds worth billions of dollars or pounds. It's yours as long as you can get to it. What would you do to access that treasure trove? Whatever means you want. You know, you can do whatever you like to get to it. Once you get to it, it's yours. Would you just leave it and move on? We won't, right?
Most people would start with the pickaxes and
or with the nails,
their
bro.
nails
Start
even.
scratching the floor,
Exactly,
bro.
yeah.
But honestly, that's what
True.
all these prison break movies, we've seen. Some of the most popular films, Shawshank Redemption, and the recent one by the guy from what's that kid's popular thing, the wizard, Harry Potter, the Daniel Radcliffe guy.
Okay.
I think that's what his name is. Yeah, he did a new movie, Escape from Pretoria.
Okay.
Again, Prison Break, very popular films, right? Why? What is the key theme in these movies, bro? You see a guy that's locked up, maybe for life, and he uses any tools at his disposal. Ingenuity. They'll use like knives, plastic knives, pieces of toothbrush.
Yeah.
They'll wire them up, and they'll start digging away, chipping away over years, right? For what? So they can escape, right? Think about that. This prisoner is spending years of his life being inventive, like you said, right? Ingenuity, to dig away to escape. Why is that so important for him?
Because he values freedom.
He values freedom.
Yep.
He's understood the value of freedom. And it means so much to him that he will do anything necessary to get that, to attain that. Right? There's another, I can't remember, man. There's another prison escape film that was out a few years back where the guy tries to break free, gets caught, then he tries again, he gets caught, and he tries again. They don't give up, right? Because they understand the value of freedom. Right? So the psychology here is, once a human being understands the value of a thing, then he will do anything to attain that thing. Now the question is, again going back to the point, have we truly understood the value of the Quran? Because if we had understood the value of the Quran, truly, would it be sitting on our shelves? Would we be picking it up once a week, once a month? What would we be doing? How would we be engaging the Quran if we understood the value of the Quran? Right?
We'll reading every time we have a free, or we make time.
We'll make time for it, yeah. We'll actually make time for it, not just even fit in our free time, but we'll make time for it.
Yeah.
But we don't.
And the thing is, we actually recognize this. I mean, I can't say never, but there's been a few times that I've been on public transport when I've seen young people opening a mushaf, just reading it, and I feel, by osmosis, I feel, the benefit of that.
Yeah.
I feel happy. Look at this believing brother. He could be watching the nonsense on his phone, but he's taken a mushaf, he's reading quietly. I've seen it on public transport a few times, and it makes me happy.
Mashallah.
And I should be that person,
Alhamdulillah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but we don't do it. That's the problem, right? So there's a disconnect somewhere. There's something in our processing which isn't strong enough to get us from point A to point B, right? And on top of it, the other sort of side issue is what is the Quran? It's guidance. Allah makes it very clear in the Quran, right? Hudan lil nas is guidance for mankind. Hudan lil muttaqeen, as Allah says in Al-Baqarah, in the beginning, very beginning of the Quran, that it's guidance for those of taqwa, people of taqwa, right? So the Quran is guidance. Now the other issue is, one, we're not picking up the Quran up, therefore we're not going to be guided by it unless we open it. Second issue is that we don't value, to some degree we don't understand the value of reading the Quran in a way that we understand it, right? We know there's rewards of reading the Arabic, right? No doubt, right? It's rewards for reading every word of the Quran in Arabic. But if you don't understand Arabic, are you going to get guidance from the Quran? Is it going to act as guidance for you? It may get you rewards, right? It may be a good thing you're doing, no doubt, right? But if the Quran, Allah is saying this is guidance, and if we don't understand the guidance and we're reading the Quran, are we going to receive that guidance? No. So we have to also emphasize and encourage people to either read the Quran in a language they understand, or translation, it's not the Quran, it's a translation of the Quran, or then to make an effort to learn the Arabic. And again, if we really value it, that shouldn't be much of a challenge. Or it'll be a challenge, but it shouldn't be much of a challenge to start engaging in that challenge, right? So we should be engaging in both. Engaging to learn the language enough so we can understand the Quran, and on top of it, at the same time, alongside that, reading it with meaning and understanding. Many good translations today, right? We don't have a shortage of good translations of the Quran. So we can access the guidance. We can see what Allah is saying to us, understand it, and then implement it. See, I tried to juxtapose two things here right now for us. One was the concept of freedom, right? That people value. Because in today's society, especially, freedom is valued. People want freedom, right? And then guidance, right? Now, if you compare the two, which one do you think is, and we have to really think about this and tell me why, which one do you think is more valuable? Freedom or guidance?
Guidance.
Why?
Because it leads to well, it is the truth.
Once you're free, what you want to do?
Yeah, once you're free, what are you going to do if you're not guided? If you don't have guidance, what is freedom for you? You're just waiting to fall, into slavery of something else, right? But if you have guidance, you can be physically trapped in this world, may not have the means, financially trapped or behind four walls somewhere, right? But if you have guidance, there's nothing greater than that. You're free, right? So many scholars of the past, when they were imprisoned, right? They say, yeah, you can imprison my body, but you can't imprison my heart, SubhanAllah. So guidance is far greater than freedom as well. And Quran is what gives us guidance. And it's not anyone's guidance. It's not a philosopher's guidance from, 2 millennia ago. It's guidance from Allah, the creator of the heavens and the earth. That's it. We need to really understand and internalize that. And if we do, then a value will become apparent. It won't be an issue for us anymore. So going off of that, and it's important to keep that in mind. And if we have an issue with that somewhere, if we say we understand that, but the Quran is still sitting on our shelves, then there's that disconnect. We need to fix that, right? Because the next session, when we go into building out the worldview, the Quran is going to play the most significant role, right? Because this is Allah's speech, right? If we're not engaging the Quran, then we're not going to, have those experiences that we need to develop our worldview properly, right? So let's look at these briefly now. Again, the four keys again: knowledge, meaning, identity, and morality from the Quran's perspective, right? So let's look at the first one. Let's start with identity. What does Allah say about our identity? What are we as human beings according to to Islam?
A soul.
Okay, there's a soul. We have a soul.
Yes.
The ruh, yeah.
And we have our physical bodies.
So this is in the 15th chapter of the Quran, for example, verse 29. So when I have fashioned him and had a spirit of my own creation breathe into him, fall down in prostration to him. So this is when the angels were told to fall down into prostration in front of Adam. Now the angels are pure beings, right? They are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? They obey the commands of Allah. They cannot refuse to obey the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These beings are being told to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, out of respect, not out of worship to Adam, out of respect. That shows the significance of this being that Allah has created. When Allah has breathed the soul into him, something to do with the soul, which elevates the human being above this sort of earthly material existence, right? Then Allah tells the angels to fall into prostration in front of Adam, out of respect, right? What else? You were saying something else.
we say there's animals, then humans, then angels. The difference between these animals obviously don't have consciousness the way we have to decide between, you know,
Rationality.
good or bad, or do X or Y. They just follow their desires, and then you have angels that, again, they don't have that. They just worship Allah, and then we in between. Physically, we may be like animals, but from the capacity that God has given us, we can be above angels if we do the things that, you know, we meant to, like worshiping God. So if we worship God by choice, that makes us better than angels. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So
That's a powerful thing right there, bro. Look at the honor in that. That Allah has created a being which has such an immense potential, right? Of choice, free will. Right?
it could either be an animal based on choice.
Worse than animals, bro.
Worse than animal, yeah.
We could become worse than animals if we choose the wrong things.
Absolutely.
Or higher than the angels if we choose to do the right things. And it makes sense as to why, because we have that free will, that choice, that intellect that Allah has given us, right? And that's very powerful in and of itself. And this also relates with the trust that Allah mentions in the Quran. That He offered the trust to the heavens and other creation. Nothing wanted to take the trust except the human being, right? So this is, and Allah also refers to us as His vicegerents on earth, His Khalifa. Think about that, right? Look at the honor in these positions that Allah is outlining. You have a soul, right? You have the potential to be greater than the angels, right? You are Allah's vicegerents upon earth, right? Allah created man in the best of forms, as Allah says in the 95th chapter of the Quran, right? Compare all of this to the conception of the human being under the secular paradigm, godless paradigm. Look at what Allah is saying and compare it to what the secular world is telling us. Intelligent animal, right? Or a being that was created in the best of forms, a unique creation of Allah, a being that the angels were told to prostrate in front of out of respect, a being that has the soul that Allah created and breathed into that human being, right? Look at the way Allah elevates and honors us, what we are. As insignificant as we are on this rock that's spinning around the sun, amongst all of these trillions of stars and galaxies that are out there, right? As small and as insignificant as we are, Allah has given us such potential, huge potential, right? To elevate ourselves above the level of the angels, if we do the right things, make the right choices, right? So we can again see, this honors the human being, it elevates the human being, right? It creates this desire within the human being to live a moral, upright life, to do good things, to live a godly life, right? To make the right sacrifices and do the right things. Whereas if you call the human being an intelligent animal that's just a composite of atoms and molecules that's here by accident, where does that start you off? Right? You can see the difference for yourself. Morality, right? We don't need to get into this too much. Very clear. Allah is telling us the way to conduct our lives. What is right, what is wrong. Islam as a whole, as a system, even if the Quran and Sunnah doesn't mention anything specifically to do with a specific thing in a given time, then all the tools are there that the scholars can use and derive rulings from, right? So there are answers to all of these things. There is also the fitrah that Allah has created, right? Allah mentions in one of the chapters of the Quran that He is the one that instilled a base understanding of right and wrong within human beings. So there's an essence of understanding of right and wrong that's already within us. And then revelation comes and it clarifies things, gives us specifics, do's and don'ts. And we know these are objective. Why? Because they're not coming from a human being or a group of human beings. They're coming from Allah directly. They're revelation. So we don't have an ethical or moral crisis. We have a clear outline, a clear text, a clear revelation that tells us what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, how to conduct ourselves in this world. You know, how to be just and upright and do all of these things. So there is no moral crisis in Islam. Right? Sure, there will be people that look at what Islam has to offer as far as morals from today's vantage point of the 21st century, and some things may not add up to them. They may not like things, right? They may not agree with certain things in Islam. Well, that's fine, because you have to acknowledge or appreciate at least that they're coming from a certain worldview. They're conditioned in a certain way to understand certain concepts and ideas, right? Such as equality, for example, between men and women. They have a certain notion of it, right? And generally speaking, is women should do exactly the same thing, or be allowed to do exactly the same things as men should do. They should be equal in every way, right? But we can, even if you start to pick this apart, you can see some of the issues with that. You know, I mean, would it be just to ask a woman to go pick up 100 kg, rolls of hay on a farm and do that all day long?
Work on a construction site.
Yeah.
Work in a mine.
Yeah, exactly.
Build a house.
I mean,
build a road.
Do you see? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. But what's amazing in Islam is that, it's not, forget feminism, forget red pill. Ignore both of these crazy ideologies today, right? Islam is right down the middle, right? It recognizes the difference between men and women, right? It caters for both men and women individually. Allah at times addresses women in the Quran, Allah at times addresses men in the Quran, Allah at times addresses both in the Quran, right? It's not about one is better than the other in Islam. It's that you're different, you have different roles, right? And you come together, and if you fulfill your own individual roles, you come together, and it results in a progressive society, in a sound society, right? It doesn't mean just because men don't do certain things women do, or women don't do certain things men do, that one is better than the other. No, they're two different things, right? And they have their own roles. And Allah honors each gender by specifically addressing them. It's not like in feminism where man is the gold standard, right? Men do this, so we need to do this, right? Why are you making man the standard anyway? Really, think about it, right? You're dishonoring yourself by making man the standard. Allah doesn't tell women to make men the standard, right? Women have their own standard. Men have their own standard. Just because they're different, it doesn't mean one is better than the other. These are two different things, right? But obviously, just as an example I'm giving you, that they'll come from a certain vantage point, a certain paradigm, right? As we've discussed up until now. So when they look at certain things within Islam, it doesn't add up to me. It doesn't make sense. And you can appreciate, and you can tell them, I can see where you're coming from, because you have this conditioning of an entire lifetime in most cases. Sometimes it takes time, understanding these things. But whether you agree or not with it, one, you should study it so you can really understand what's going on. And in most cases, when they actually study the things they don't agree with in Islam, they actually understand the wisdom behind it. Because most of the time when people have issues with certain things in the Quran, it's not because they've studied it. It's because they just looked at it in a superficial way and just jumped to conclusions, right? So if you study it, things may make sense to you. But even if they don't, the point is, our morals and ethics come from the divine source, which is the objective source, right? Whereas anything outside of that, it's subjective. Yeah, it may be a good attempt, no doubt, and some good attempts have been made, but it doesn't mean it's always going to be right. Humans always err, right? There will be errors. Even if it's a collective, it doesn't matter. It'll always be subjective. So we have our moral outlook and perspective. The next thing is the meaning of life. Again, Allah clarifies this for us very clearly in the Quran. What does Allah say? What is our purpose?
To worship Allah.
To worship Allah. Chapter 51, verse 56. I did not create the jinn and humans except to worship me. That is our purpose. Allah created us to know Him and to worship Him. Now obviously when we talk about worship, it doesn't just mean praying 5 times a day, right? Or doing the 5 pillars of Islam. These are aspects of worship, integral aspects of worship, but it's not the whole of worship. If Allah is telling us our entire lives, our entire existence is about worshipping Him, then this is a problem, because I'm praying 5 times a day, right? And it's probably taking half an hour. What am I doing the 23.5 hours or 23 and a half hours the rest of the day? How is that worship? So we have to understand that your entire day can be a form of worship, but it's based on your intention, how you look at your day, how you conduct yourself, why you do what you do, the decisions you make, the choices you make, right? The times you work on yourself and you're developing yourself and your character and all of these things, right? So worship is comprehensive in Islam, but our objective and our ultimate purpose is to worship Allah. That could be expressed, aside from the key ways Allah has outlined for us, the pillars, the rituals, it could be expressed in many different ways for many different people, right? So it could be your skills, right? So Tariq, mashallah, is very good at writing, for example. So his expression of his worship, at least for some part of his day, in the dawah at least, is what? That he's writing. He's not out doing talks and lectures, because that's not his style, right? He's been gifted with certain things, he has certain skills, and he's using them. So a part of this, Allah created me to worship Him, is you, again, using your mind and thinking about, okay, what skills has Allah blessed me with? What abilities has He given me that I can use in His path? Right? Very important. Don't just jump and, okay, what's going on in the dawah? People are doing street dawah, and just go and do street dawah. It may not be for you. Maybe Allah wants something else from you. He's set your life up in a way where He wants you to achieve something else. So give it thought, reflect upon it, think about what you can bring to the deen, how you can worship Allah. Right? So this is very important as well. But the key thing is, again, we are not left in that state of that existential nihilism anymore. It's very clear we were created to know and worship Allah. So we can wrap up on this point now. We can see how quickly we can go through these points. Yeah, we could have elaborated on them more and gone into details, but every single one of those 4 issues, the Quran addresses, right? And this is why for me at least, pragmatically, one of the pragmatic proofs of Islam is the fact that it addresses all of these fundamental questions. Our epistemic questions, our existential questions, our moral, ethical questions, it addresses everything. Right? It puts everything in place. And there's so many other things the Quran addresses. The problem of evil and suffering. That's another big issue for people. Right? The Quran addresses this. It's all there. It all makes sense. Right? We agree it makes sense. Right? And you can build out a very nice cosmology, if you like, a system where you can see how this Islam provides a comprehensive worldview, paradigm for us to adopt and to understand and for us to function in this world. However, the challenge now is it good enough to just know or just understand these things? Like if you should understand these things and go back to living the way you're living, it's pointless. You're not going to get nothing out of it, right? It's just information that's just jammed into your mind, right? And that's not going to be worthwhile, right? I'll finish on this one story that Sheikh, not story, but a point that Sheikh Yawar Beg makes. Very powerful point, right? And he mentioned this to us. We went to see him once, a few years back. And one of the things he said is always stuck is, he said, look, La ilaha illallah. What does that mean?
There's no God but Allah.
Yeah, there is no God but Allah. There's no deity worthy of worship except Allah. Every Muslim knows this, right? And he asked us, he said, is this information or is this knowledge? And we were confused, right? And then he elaborated further and he said, look, you know La ilaha illallah. Did the prophets know La ilaha illallah? Absolutely. Right? And then he went more specific. He said, did Ibrahim alayhi salam know La ilaha illallah? Yes. But he said what it meant for him and what it means for us is 2 different things. For them it was knowledge. For us, for many of us, unfortunately, it's just information. Just words. Right? And he gave the example of, when Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he smashes the idol and they build this huge fire and they build this catapult and they put him in the catapult, right? Just imagine this scene, man. Yeah, put yourself in that catapult for a second. You're going into that fire, one way or the other, right? And as he's slung from the catapult and he's flying through the air, right? And this is moments, literally, right? Gravity is acting upon him and he's coming down and all of this stuff. The angel comes to him. And what does the angel say to Ibrahim alayhi salam? Can I help you? He's like, do you want me to assist you? I'm paraphrasing, but he's here to help. Allah has sent the angel, right? Now, if he had accepted the help of the angel, is there anything wrong in that scenario? No. It's come from Allah. No problem. But how did Ibrahim alayhi salam respond? Hasbi Allahu. Yeah, wa ni'mal wakeel. That Allah is sufficient for me and He is the best disposer of affairs. Very powerful if you think about it. In that moment of calamity, where he's facing imminent death, right? Angels come. I mean, any one of us, if we had the privilege of being helped by Allah through an angel, would be like, yes, take me out of this, right? They say there's no atheists on a sinking ship. What do they scream out? God help me, right? Save me, right? We would all do this, right? right? But Ibrahim Islam says, Allah is sufficient for me and He is the best disposer of affairs. He doesn't say, Allah help me. Angel's already there before he makes such a plea. He says, Allah is sufficient for me and He's the best disposer of affairs. One, by doing this, he removes the middleman. This was his understanding of La ilaha illallah, that there is no deity worthy of worship or praise except Allah. He understood it to such a depth. It was knowledge for him that he knew it changed his reality. We talk about paradigms, right? Paradigm shifts and worldviews. Just to study the worldview of the prophets, how they had integrated it into their whole being, their psychology, their spirituality, that he's in such a state and he removes the middleman. He didn't have to. And he goes straight directly to Allah. And what's even amazing, like I was reflecting upon this yesterday, is if we were in such a situation, we would straight away, at the very, even atheists, they'll be like, God help me, save me. Our will in that situation is, we want to be saved. We want to survive. But Ibrahim alayhi salam's understanding of Allah and of the kalima is so profound that his will is in line with Allah's will. Allah is sufficient for me. He's the best disposer of affairs. Whatever Allah wants is fine. That's what I want. Look at the depth of the state, bro, subhanAllah. Right? In that situation. I mean, if we can achieve even 5% of that, guys, well, our lives will be different. He'll be on fire, like Iqbal talks about, the khudi and igniting the khudi, the self. If we can achieve 5% of that, honestly, we could change the world. And this is the crisis, isn't it, really? And for us, myself included, it's profound when you think about it. Right? His will is whatever Allah's will is in that situation. He doesn't care. And then when he lands in the fire, what does Allah do? Look at the response of Allah. Allah tells the fire to become cool. Allah could have sent the rain. Rain starts, within seconds it'll come down, put the fire. Allah changes the laws of physics, literally. Allah tells the hot fire, the nature of the fire is to burn, full stop. But Allah tells the fire to become cool. And he falls in the fire, he's not harmed. The ropes, the commentary says, ropes burn away, and he walks out of the fire. Unharmed, untouched. Amazing, man, subhanAllah. Absolutely amazing. Yes, these are the prophets, and yes, we can't, but we should aspire. Because such events have not only happened with the prophets, they've happened with some of the companions too. They had some phenomenal experiences. And the point isn't to have a phenomenal experience like this. The point is to know that if you move yourself towards Allah and you connect with Him and you develop your relationship with Him, your life will change. Allah will be guiding and directing you through your life. Right? But the question is, you have to get yourself in that pocket, into that frame, right? That paradigm. And then things will start to change. We have to make the first move always. In this life, Allah is not going to come in front of you and say, look, here I am, worship me. Right? Now worship me. That's not the objective. Allah tells us in Surah Mulk that He created life and death to test which of us is best in action. It's a test. Right? Allah's not going to reveal the answers before the test is done. So we have to always make the first move. Right? Next week, we're going to start getting into this now. And we're going to look at the first few verses of Al-Baqarah, because I think they're very powerful. Because Allah knows best, but what happens in Al-Baqarah in the beginning, Allah outlines the characteristics of the people that will find guidance from the Quran. Right? And I think if we reflect upon these, when we reflect upon these characteristics Allah outlines, you'll see is that most of them are actions, which when one engages in, it helps build that worldview. It shapes your psychology, right? And we'll juxtapose it and you'll see clearly how those things are completely against what the modern world is teaching us. Right? I'm not going to spoil it too much, but we'll get into that next week, inshallah. Any questions, guys?
Jazakallah khair.
All right, Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum, brothers.